Hey guys, in this section we're going to be talking about JavaScript loops. And a loop is basically just a block of code that will keep running over and over until a certain condition is met. Most programming languages have multiple types of loops. We're going to be going over for loops, while loops, and for in loops. So I'm going to create a new folder, and this is chapter 2, section 3. And again, I'm just going to create one file, and this is going to be index.html. So I can open that with in the browser. And I'm also going to open it in Notepad++. Now I'm going to just paste in some HTML. So we have our structure. We're going to do this in the body. We're going to add our script tags. Now I'm going to start with the for loop. So you may remember the syntax from the first section when we went over the PowerPoint. What we want to do is say for, put some curly braces. Now in the parentheses we want to have 3 parameters. The first, we want to declare a variable, so we'll say variable I is equal to 0, and we want to separate these with a semicolon. The next parameter is the condition, so let's say I, as long as I is less than 10. Alright, so that's the condition, and then we just want to increment, so we want to do I plus plus plus, which it'll just add 1 to the I each time around. So we're starting at 0, and the condition is as long as I is less than 10, and then we're incrementing each loop, each time it loops. Now here is where we specify what we actually want to happen each iteration. Each time a loop runs through its course is called an iteration. We'll say document.write, which is the function that writes out input to the screen, to the browser. And we'll say, we'll have a string, and we'll call it number. And then what we want to do is concatenate the I, whatever the I is, in that current iteration. And if you remember, we can concatenate with a plus sign, and we can throw in the I, which is a variable. And we want to put a space here so that we have a space after the word number. So let's save this and let's run this. Okay, so we have number 0 through number 9. Now I want to put a line break so that we have our numbers on a separate line. So we can concatenate again, we'll say with the plus sign, and then we need quotes, and we'll put in an HTML BR tag. Save that and reload, and now we have it on each line. Now you may ask why it only goes to 9. That's because we're saying as long as I is less than 10. So that doesn't include 10. It's less than 10. What we need to do if we want the actual 10 is to say if I is less than or equal to 10. So if we save that and reload, then we get the 10. So that's a for loop. Now I'll show you how to do the exact same thing with a while loop. So let's just get rid of this. Clear that out. Alright, so with a while loop, we don't claim the variable. We don't declare the variable inside of anything. We just declare it as we would any variable. So we'll say variable I equals 0, and now we use the while keyword with parentheses and curly braces. Now in the parentheses we only want one parameter, and that's the condition. So we'll say while I is less than 10. And then what we want to do is print out just like we did. We'll say document.write, and what did we say? We said number space I plus br. Alright, now we don't have the increment yet. We need to do that after what we want to happen. So we're just going to say I plus plus. So this will do the exact same thing. Let's save it and reload, and you can see it goes up to 9. Again, we can add the equal sign if we want to go to 10. So this is the same exact thing. You're claiming the variable, you're stating the condition, you're doing what you want to do each iteration, and then you're incrementing I. Alright, so now I want to get into arrays and loops, and you can use any type of loop with an array in JavaScript, but the for in loop is often used. So what I'm going to do is create an array. Let's say var people, and that is going to equal, and we can do new array, or we can just use brackets. So I'm just going to use the brackets, and we're going to say Sally, Bob, Steve, and Jen. Alright, so now we have an array. We have an array called people with 4 values. Now what I want to do is, instead of calling a single value like we could just do this people people 0. I'm sorry, we need to document write. And we went over this in the last section. We can easily print out an array value, but what I want to do is loop through and print out all the values on the screen. And like I said, we can do that with any kind of loop, but the for in loop is specifically created for arrays. So how we would do that is very easy. We're just going to say for, and we'll say x, we'll use I again. So we'll say I in people. We'll open some curly braces, and here we want to write out each iteration. We want to write out the name, okay, or the value. So we want to do document.write, and we'll say people I. So we want that I because that's going to be replaced each iteration with a name or a value. So let's save that, and let's actually concatenate a line break. So we have these all on separate lines. So if we reload, now we get all the arrays printed out. And if we add to the array, let's say Tom, it automatically is going to be added to the loop. And like I said before, we don't have to use a for in loop with an array. We can just use a standard for loop or a while loop. So I'll show you how to do the same thing with a for loop. So we're going to say for parentheses, curly braces, and the first parameter again is going to be the declaration. I'm going to say I is equal to 0 and have a semicolon. And now instead of saying I is less than a certain number, we're going to say people.length. Now remember, we talked about objects and properties. The array people is an object, and since it's an object, it has properties, and one of the properties that's included in the core of JavaScript is length, and that can mean different things depending on the object. If this is a variable, just say a string, it's going to be the number of letters or characters in that string or in that variable. If it's an array, then length is going to give us the number of values in the array. Okay, so we're saying I equals 0 for as long as I is less than the length or the number of values, then we're going to run some code. But we also can't forget to add on the increment. So what we want to do is do the same thing. We want to print it out to the screen. So we'll say document.write, and let's see, we'll just print out people I, and we also want to add on a line break. Save that, and we have the same thing. Just to make sure, we'll take off Tom. Alright, so that's doing the same exact thing. And now I'll show you how to do this with a while loop. Let's just copy this because that's not going to change. So we'll say I equals 0, and we want to say while I is less than people.length. Then we want to say document.write people I. Now let's just concatenate a line break. Save that, and oh, you know what? Now what we're doing here, why this is happening, is our loop is just it's going to keep looping because we didn't increment. So I is always equal to 0. So this is just it's just going to keep looping. So we need to add that increment. So we'll stop that and reload. Let's just open it up again. Alright, so now we have our names. So like I said, it's really preference what loop you want to use in what situation. I myself tend to stick to for loops even when dealing with arrays, but like I said, it's all preference. So that's how you deal with arrays, loops and arrays in JavaScript. The next video will be talking about functions.